Hi guys, thank you so much for joining me for the now video version of my podcast, Chasing Heroine, on this day. So as of right now, we've just done audio podcasts and episodes on Spotify. We have a full season. Our first season has 20 episodes. And I got a lot of feedback that people wanted to actually watch some of the episodes too on YouTube. And I don't know enough about editing yet to film our full episodes, but what I can do is record every other episode as a solo cast. So you guys have just me. I'm gonna keep it shorter. I mean, I don't usually keep anything short, but as short as I can for me. I'm fairly long-winded, like 10 to 20 minutes. And the premise of the Chasing Heroine podcast is that either myself or another addict in recovery share a story where we were on this day in history, what happened, what we learned, where we are now. And every other week will be a solo cast with me. Sometimes it'll be stories like it actually is today, but more often than not, it's also gonna be, you know, there are so many things that I learned that have helped me actually finally stay sober in the beginning, and that continue to reinforce my sobriety now. So as of this recording, I have 6.5 years clean and sober. And for my recovery purposes, what I mean by sobriety is complete sobriety from all mind and mood altering substances. No drinking, no smoking weed, none of that kind of stuff. However, I don't judge anybody else's process in recovery. And I think that sometimes what people forget is that sobriety is about quality of life. And if somebody can get off of, you know, shooting heroin and risking their health every day by sharing needles, but they can get on Suboxone and their quality of life returns, then I really think that however anybody proceeds with their sobriety is between them and God, and that's not for me to judge. But just for clarity, in terms of if you're watching this, you're wondering where I'm at, I'm 12-step based, I'm a 12-step fan, and abstinence is kind of my game. That's what I do. So for today's episode, which is the first one on YouTube, and again, I'm like really new to doing this. I don't know how to edit any of this, so if I make a mistake, I don't know how to edit it. You'll just see it. I can edit it from the podcast, but I don't know how to edit the video. So like, I'm gonna do my best, but you know, be nice in the comments because I don't know how to turn those off either. So anyways, so this is what I wanted to talk about today. It was my birthday a few weeks ago, and I thought about a birthday experience 11 years ago and then the one that I just had a few weeks ago, and like the difference between the two. And I'm I do a lot of comparison of my life in active addiction and my life in sobriety. And I think that constant comparison, I have a decent memory. I kind of remember everything that happened. And that constant comparison actually really keeps me in gratitude. So I'll start with the birthday from 11 years ago. So what happened was I was turning an age that was like really freaking me out, and I was very scared to turn this particular age. James Taylor and Carole King were playing at the Hollywood Bowl. I lived in LA on my actual birthday, and I thought, okay, this will actually make this birthday easier to swallow. If I go to this concert on my actual birthday, it's at the Hollywood Bowl, it's amazing. So I called a really good friend of mine. He actually was my boyfriend in LA for a little while, and we stayed really good friends. We're friends to this day. And asked him if he wanted to come down, go with me to this show, whatever. So he actually bought the tickets as a gift to me, flew down to see me and hang out. And we were both super excited about this show. So I was living in San Diego at the time. I'd already moved to San Diego. Day of the show, drive to LA. We're like super excited. And I have this bar that I love in LA. It's called the Cozy Inn, and it's in Culver City. And if you do still drink and you live in LA, you should go there. This place is great. And it's like a dive bar. When I was there, you could still smoke inside. There's like a real jukebox. I just loved it. And you know, I don't know, it could have changed. And this was the last time I went, but I loved it. So we drove up and we were gonna hit Cozy's before we went to the concert. So we're at Cozy's, we're hanging out, we're talking, and we'd gotten Coke on the way up. We'd gotten some cocaine on the way up. So we're like doing Coke in the bathroom, drinking, talking. The hours are kind of passing. And I don't know which one of us had the idea. He's sober too now, by the way. He's like 5 years or something. Had the idea to just bag the concert and continue drinking and like doing Coke in this little dive bar. And thought that was a good idea and that was a better plan. So I called another buddy of mine in LA. He came and picked up the tickets. He went to the Hollywood Bowl and scalped the tickets, brought us the money, and we like bought more Coke and stayed the night in this like shitty motel with the guy that I was going to go from at the time and my friend, and stayed up all night and missed the show. And my come downs from cocaine were so bad. Like, I can't believe I did it for so long. I would be so sick. I felt terrible, like way sicker than any other drug would make me. And it remained my drug of choice for a really long time, but it would just brutalize me. So the next day I'm super sick, driving back home to San Diego, and I had missed this show. And people were like asking me about it in the weeks afterwards. And I was like, oh yeah, it was like legendary. And funny story, a client that I have now, I own a fitness studio in San Diego, and a client that I have now was actually at that show, and it came up in conversation once, and he was like, oh my God, he had box seats for this show, and he was like, it was amazing. I'm like, good, that's great. Can't believe I missed it, So in the weeks after that, I was embarrassed that I hadn't gone. And in the subsequent years after that, I mean, that's like the concert of a lifetime to have gone. And it's things like that. There weren't any really external consequences from that. Nothing happened. I didn't like get a DUI on the way home or anything. But the internal consequences of making a choice like that and then lying to everybody about it, it's disappointing, and it starts to corrode your self-esteem. When you constantly just do these little things that you're not proud of, and especially if they lead to some dishonesty on your part. So that was the birthday, 11 years ago. 3 weeks ago, another birthday. So my entire life has changed in the 11 years. And that's kind of some of the stuff that I talk about, that I'll talk about here on this show, and that I talk about on the podcast, the audio version. Everything has changed. I now have 6.5 years sober. I met a great guy at a meeting of Heroine Anonymous. We are now married, and we have this wonderful life. These are actually the blueprints from the construction job he's working on. He's so good at his job. I'm so proud of him. He's amazing. We have this great life. So he surprised me. So also in sobriety, I've become a total like Harry Potter nerd, and I'm proud of that. I'm fine with that. I love it. I love the books. I love the movies. I'm obsessed with it. And Universal Studios in LA has like this Harry Potter world, and I've always wanted to go there. So my husband surprised me with a trip with a few of my really good friends. I think there were 5 of us, a surprise trip to Harry Potter. And he'd rented this nice car, and we all drove up to Harry Potter on a Sunday, and we went crazy at Universal Studios. And it was just such an amazing feeling to be there. And if you're an addict like I'm an addict, there are so many things about this that were very unlikely to happen and would have been impossible before, which is that, first of all, a husband that I was like married, you could just stop there. But not only just a husband, but a husband that like had the resources and the capacity and the desire to surprise me with something, and something that I really wanted to do, and had the ability to make all that happen. Like I'm in a relationship where we do that. We had the money to go. We had driver's licenses. I didn't even have a license for like 5 years. I have friends. Again, you could stop there, that I just have friends. But I have friends with the resources to go, who care about me enough to make the 1.5-hour drive up to LA and like go with me to Harry Potter. And when we were walking around the park, there were a few times when I just kind of like stopped and thought, my God, like I am so grateful that I'm here now. And this is why I do this show. And it's like my biggest desire in life is to share with other people that your life doesn't have to continue as you know it if you don't want it to. And a few days later, I was reading, so I still read. The different fellowships typically have like daily readings, and my favorite is the NA reading, which is called Just for Today. And as part of I have like a daily routine. I'll do an episode about that too, but I have a daily routine, and as part of my daily routine, I read the Just for Today. And that day in the park, like I felt positive. And then a few days later, and this is why I love staying connected to the literature 6.5 years later, you'll have this good feeling, and then you read something like this, and you make the connection, oh yeah, that's why. This is a direct gift of my recovery. And it reminds you that you're in recovery, and it keeps you in gratitude. And that place of gratitude is really where I like to stay, and I think has supported my sobriety in the long term, because it was almost impossible for me to stop. I was using for 15 years. The last 5 years of my using, I was strung out, homeless, or in jail. I was an active IV heroin and meth user. And you guys, I couldn't even get more than like 90 days. The longest I'd ever gotten was 94 days. I could not stop using. I could not stop using drugs. I didn't want to be using drugs anymore, and I could not stop. And so staying in gratitude now hopefully helps me ensure that, you know, I don't go back to that place. So I was reading, and this was May 20th. So my birthday is the 14th. A few days later, I was reading the Gist for Today, and this is what it was. We find ourselves doing and enjoying things that we never thought we would be doing. That's the quote at the top. That's from the basic text, which is the NA book. And then it says, active addiction kept us isolated for many reasons. Today, our lives are much fuller. Our lives narrowed and our concerns were confined to the daily maintenance of our disease. And as a heroin addict, that's even more so. You have to stay well every few hours. Today, our lives are much fuller. We enjoy activities with other recovering addicts. We have time for our families. And we've discovered many other pursuits that give us pleasure. What a change from the past. So I read this a few days later, and it literally like brought tears to my eyes that I had gone from scalping those tickets to a legendary concert so that I can continue just like use drugs in this dark bar to having the full life, like that I'm nerding out at a theme park based on a book. So I read a book too. That's new. That's different, you know? And reading that kind of like put into words what I was feeling, which was, oh yeah, like I went from feeling I was this person that just, I couldn't even manage anything. You know, part of why I didn't go to that show is because life was just too much for me. Driving there, parking, going inside, like all of that stuff was kind of like outside the scope of my ability as an adult, which is painful to admit because I'm smart. I did well academically, and to like look at my life and see that I'd become someone that couldn't manage stuff like that and like had those experiences was really painful. But I read that and I saw that, yeah, like my life is so much fuller. And for anybody watching, if you guys are still, or listening, if you guys are still struggling in active addiction, it won't be like that forever. And if you can find a journey, I recommend the 12 steps, but if you can find a journey that can propel you forward into a life of sobriety and recovery, you know, we get to do things like this. And I never thought that I would. And another thing that I was reminded of today when I was kind of planning this, Cheryl Strayed, I don't know if you guys saw the movie Wild. It's a great movie. She was a heroin addict, and then she went on that hiking trip up the Pacific Coast Trail and wrote a book about it, did really well. They made a movie, and I went and saw the movie. I was still using when I saw the movie. And afterwards, my mom even said to me, because I was like crying, she was like, I did not think that the movie was going to be your exact life. Like, I'm so sorry. And I was like, that's okay. You know, she brought me back to my sober living. I had relapsed, but I was still in sober living, which is something I had done all the time, which if you want to know more about that, listen to the podcast. But I was so moved by the movie, even though it was painful, that I was like researching more about it. And I came across a Cheryl Strayed quote at that time. So this would have been like 7 years ago. And it was beautiful. It struck me. And then one day you find yourself alone on a bench in the sun. You close your eyes and lean your head back and you realize you're okay. And when I read that on my bunk bed in my sober living that I was probably going to get kicked out of soon, it was kind of like when I would hear the promises be read at AA meetings, like that idea that you won't wish to close the door on your past and you won't regret it. This is a Glennon Doyle thing, but it was like looking into the sun to hear things like that. It was too hard for me to even comprehend that there would be peace and serenity out there for me. You know, I was just in so much pain and so much darkness, and I was like so ashamed of my life and what I had done with my life and what I wasn't doing with my life. And I read that quote and it made me sad at the time, but it went in there somehow. And this morning when I was planning this show and what I was going to say, I remembered that quote. And there was a moment when I was sitting at the Leaky Cauldron, which is the restaurant bar that they replicated at Universal Studios. And I know that this is like the dorkiest thing ever, but I don't care. And I was drinking a butter beer with my friends, which is so good. You must try one. Drinking a butter beer with my husband, with my friends. And we were sitting at this table outside. And I really did. I had a moment where I just kind of like stepped back and looked at my friends and thought, like, I'm okay. I'm okay. I got here. I'm happy. I have friends. Oh my God, I'm not strung out anymore. You know, like I have this life. And so if you guys take anything out of this today, a few things. One, that move of not going to that show, that was like a drug addict move, you know? And if I had had the ability to look honestly at some of my choices back then, I maybe could have gotten into this process a little sooner. And so I always encourage honest reflection, you know, looking at your life and going, man, was that like a drug addict move, or was that an alcoholic move? And you know intuitively whether or not it is. And so I always encourage looking at that stuff honestly, but then also, you guys, life can be so much better, and it doesn't have to involve getting well every day. And it doesn't have to involve just moving from one crisis to another. And you have the ability, we have the abilities to have a life where we contribute to society, where we not only enjoy our own lives, but we're able to like give back to other people and like have a family if that's what you want, or own a business. And if anything else, my hope with these is to inspire hope in other people. I also recommend getting connected to literature, staying connected to the recovery literature. It's all pretty good, the AA Daily Reflections. I like this one the best, but whatever you get into, stay connected to it. It'll keep you, you know, in that space where you remember that you're in recovery. And things like this still hit me to this day. And I go, oh yeah, that's right. Like, I'm so happy this is what I'm doing. So anyways, I hope everybody is doing great. I'm so excited to be returning to season 2 of the podcast. Like I said, we were doing episodes every other week. I'm going to do my best to do episodes now weekly. Every Thursday they release. And then every other episode I will also record for YouTube, which is what you are watching right now. So as always, if you guys could rate and review the show, I value your reviews so much. The most current review, there might be a new one by the time you guys see this. It's from someone in Ohio, and she said, you guys are keeping me clean every day. And I read it like right before I went to bed a few weeks ago. And the show's kind of a lot of work, and it's a little nerve-wracking to do because it's just me. It's just me telling you guys all the stupid shit I did, and it's kind of vulnerable and it's nerve-wracking. But when I read that review, I can't even begin to express to you what that did for me. So y'all's reviews, I read each one of them. They keep me going. But more than that, on another level, the more positive reviews we have, or just reviews we have in general, we start to kind of get like bumped up in the algorithm of Apple. So if somebody is searching for something in recovery, our podcast could potentially be recommended to them and like show up on that screen. And so your review is also helping other addict alcoholics hear a message of hope. So thank you guys so much for listening, for watching. And if there is anything in particular with recovery too that you guys like want me to talk about a little bit for one of these solo casts, let me know. You know, I'm here to talk about whatever you guys want to talk about. I'll answer anything. And thank you guys so much for listening.